And once again, we have with us our partner, Stephanie Kalota. She's U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class and veteran, founder and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice, and she's an AHG correspondent. And don't forget, September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness and Hispanic Heritage Month. Make sure you go log into our website, americashg.org, see some of our old shows. You can see Stephanie Kalota and some of the things she's been working on over the last few years. And then also make sure that you like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, America's Heroes Group. How you doing, Stephanie?
I'm doing all right.
So are you concerned about this federal budget? This is something that we have until October 1st is our deadline, and once again we're having this conversation about bills not being paid, appropriations bills not being paid, fees and things like that, that aren't being taken care of. So what's going on?
That's why I said I'm doing all right, because it's a little stressful for myself and probably a good handful of veterans. And one of the reasons is because the VA is actually going through a budget shortfall as well. So that's been coming out in the last couple of weeks, that the VA is actually having a bit of a empty nest of budget funding, the mandatory funding, and that's mostly because of the PACT Act. And the PACT Act was so great. It helped a lot of veterans get enrolled into healthcare, get their VA disability. A lot of veterans, I believe 1 million veterans got their claims approved for burn pits and toxic exposures connected to the PACT Act. And 500,000 veterans were able to enroll because they opened up the space for more enrollment, more eligibility. So that's really great for veterans as well. Because once they can get healthcare within the VA, they can get some more things covered. They can get diagnosis. They can get tests, which could also help them with VA disability and compensation for their claims. So just getting that started is a really great step for a lot of veterans. But the problem is that so many veterans took advantage of this. So now the VA is running out of money. So typically VA disability does not really get affected by government shutdowns. They've made those precautions before, but right now there isn't anything for them to use when we do come up with that shortfall with the government possible government shutdown coming up with the budget.
And I think it's heartbreaking that a lot of people that are still serving, I mean, thank God I never had to go through this, even though I was just getting a guard check for the most part. But I mean, service members having to go to work every day and not getting paid, and having to, you have families that are on food stamps. You have service member families that are living on public aid, and they could possibly go, who knows how long. I think the last one was 19 days or 39 days, wasn't it? The last one we had, 2019. I think that was one of the last ones we had.
Yes, I think. Oh goodness, don't quote me on it. I am not going to estimate on how long we had that government shutdown. Yeah,
that was. You mean, so this the fact that we're in this situation again. Tell us a little bit what actually happens. I know that there's partial shutdowns and there's full blown, full shutdowns when depending on what's paid for, what's not paid for. So how does that play out, particularly when it comes to defense and with the Veterans Administration?
It depends on the type of continued resolution that they also are able to pass, because some continued resolutions that pass, they have approved for like just partial running of the government. And then other times it's full running just on the previous funding that they've had before, same amount of money. But then there's full on shutdowns like we had for Obamacare. And then we also had for when Trump was in office, in 2019. So there's a varied amount of different things that can happen. What's coming up may be a full-on shutdown. It depends on what goes on and what gets agreed to. But there's a couple of things going on with the government right now, especially in the House, that's causing a lot of effects. And that's something called the SAFE Act. And so the SAFE Act has to do with this upcoming election. This is a bill that President Trump endorses. SAVE Act, SAVE. And so what it does is that it actually requires anyone that wants to vote, requires that they show their proof of citizenship.
Yeah.
So this is just to really stoke the fire on the argument that non-citizens are voting for federal elections, which is illegal and has been since the 90s, like an actual federal illegal act. And the problem is that the percentage of this, of non-citizens actually voting, what was it? The Brienne Center found that 0.0001% of the votes of the 2016 election were actually done by non-voters.
Wow. And then one of the things they're talking about too as well with the SAVE Act is that they're actually wanting people to have proof of citizenship through things like a birth certificate. So it's not even something as simple as having a driver's license. They want some things that many people may not have readily available when they go to vote.
Yeah, it's their driver's license plus a birth certificate or something like that. It's not just that. You can also use your passport. There's other things that you can use, like, for instance, indigenous peoples. They have their tribal government ID with their applicant's birthplace and the citizenship. The thing is that they're really requiring a photo ID with the actual state of where they were born and certifying that you're a citizen. And the problem is that so many citizens don't have this document readily available. I am notorious for losing my birth certificate. God forbid I need that again. But I mean, I've just got my own passport because I'm planning on international travel. So thank God I have that. But not many people have passports. There's only a fraction of citizens that have passports nowadays, especially since it's god awful expensive. So, I mean, it's going to cause a lot of issues. It's going to cause a lot of a rush, especially when we're 2 months away from a federal election.
And yeah, exactly. So close to the election, but then also the fact that you have Donald Trump who's pushing this, and right now, that's the House Speaker is actually trying to push back on this because they know this could be disastrous if there's no budget passed, because you're trying. So people understand they want to attach this provision to make this part of the condition that there will be a budget. So they're not letting the Republican part of the Congress vote for or approve a budget until they add this provision, the SAVE Act, and put it into effect to make it hard for people to vote, because they believe that it will what they really believe is that it'll cause a lot of young people and the people that are more likely to vote Democratic to not be able to vote, because a lot of kids going to college are not going to have their birth certificates. A lot of young people won't have their birth certificates, or they won't have the Safe ID, or I forget the name of the idea with the flight ID. Now you have what's it called again?
So I know for real ID.
Real ID.
Yeah, not many people have that either.
Right.
So, and certain states still haven't actually gotten their stuff, or last I checked, but when I was in Washington, they haven't actually updated their state driver's license up to the standards for the real ID. So when I was supposed to be traveling, when I was in Washington, they were starting to have issues with the FAA. So we would have to actually require additional paperwork whenever we had to fly.
Wow.
It was a mess. So I'm getting flashbacks from all of that mess as well. So we'll see how things go. Speaker Johnson was adamant for a while about having that included, and they were supposed to have a vote 4 days ago. But then hours before they were supposed to vote on this bill, he pulled the vote, or pretty much pulled it off the schedule. And it kind of caused a lot of ripples in effect, because a lot of speakers in the past, they don't put a bill out when they know they're going to win. So if they don't think that's going to pass, they don't put it out. And Speaker Johnson likely got enough people to tell him that they're not voting for it, because there's a lot of Republicans that were against that as well, because it could actually affect a lot of the older citizens as well. So, I mean, just imagine the older senior citizens that don't have driver's licenses.
Right.
They probably don't have passports because they're too old to travel.
And God, who knows if they can find their birth certificate anywhere.
Right. And
If they
you
needed to go
can't,
get it, how long would that take? Especially if the government shuts down.
yes, you can't just go to the ballot box with this bill. You can't just go to the ballot box with just your actual birth certificate. You need a photo ID on top of that.
Hmm.
So that then you have to get a state ID, not for the driver's license, which I know a lot of senior citizens don't actually get if they can't drive.
Mhm.
So
Right.
it's just another complication that they can add to it. Me being from Florida, because there's a lot of senior citizens here, they actually outnumber the youth population, the young population here. And Florida's greatest export are people that die and want to get buried back home. They
Mhm.
come here to die. So I can only imagine how many senior citizens would be affected by this. Veterans sitting, they're at the VA-run senior citizen homes, and they could likely be affected by this as well. It can cause a lot of issues.
Mm. And how would you even implement that with, absentee ballots? I mean, how would that even work? I mean, how do you
That's true. I didn't even think about that. That
run
is so
copy with
true.
your absentee ballot? I mean, that's, all this does is cause chaos and confusion, and we're literally just 2 months away from election day. I mean, less than 2 months away, to election day. How are you going to put all this stuff in place? And there was an NPR report not too long ago, about, I think it was last week, that talked about how, because a lot of people were saying, particularly from the Republican side and the conservative side, the right side, that they believe that elections are flawed, that there's so much cheating going on. People that are voting not supposed to vote, they're busing, as Trump said, busing people in to vote. They're illegal. They shouldn't be voting, even though there was no evidence of these types of things. And even all the research and data that's been done, like you mentioned, found that there was really no any significant material and influence on trying to change an election or cheat votes, basically. So this basically is a false claim.
Mhm.
However, every time they do put changes in these different states, the people that are the pollsters, the people that work the polls, have to get retrained and have to get retaught all of the new rules and things along those lines, which creates even more confusion, because now you get all these people back into these training facilities, get retrained on the new practices, and then be able to be ready by election day.
Yep. And then I'm also thinking about those poor people that volunteer, the poll workers. And with this bill coming up, and then more talk about it, more hate and vitriol about illegal immigrants, and pretty much anyone that doesn't look like an American citizen, so anyone that is not white, could possibly cause, get some type of issue and harassment just trying to go to the poll, to their polling stations. Because last elections, 2022 and 2020, there were people, part of the militias, that have actually caused many issues. They were actually going to the polling stations and trying to harass people when they're going in to vote, to secure the ballot stations and things like that. Trump's actually encouraged people to do that. And that can cause more harassment for anyone that does not typically look like a citizen.
Mm-hmm. And
So
that
that can
seems highly illegal at the same time, because really what you're doing is you're trying to intimidate people from voting, and basically depriving them of their rights. And which is unfortunately, this country has a legacy that goes back all the way back to slavery. I mean, women couldn't vote, people of color couldn't vote, and
you didn't have a property.
And all kinds of tests and things. What they had, the poll test, or the poll taxes and poll tests and things, to try to get people to not be able to qualify to vote, because they don't want those outcomes. They don't want the outcomes of their people losing, their elections, which is sad and pathetic, really.
Yeah, it is really sad, and it's really frustrating. But the thing is that this also affects our current military right now. And that's because if we do a continued resolution, which not only just a government shutdown, but if we only just do a stopgap measure, which has been proposed for 6 months. And one of the reasons why the 6 months have been proposed one of the things that has been coming up with the federal budget that's going to be happening, potential shutdown or the continuing resolution, is that it's going to actually affect more than just our veterans, because the stopgap and things like that. It's going to affect our current military, and not just, that they're not going to get paid for a while. The thing is that so Secretary Austin, Defense Secretary Austin, said that the stopgap measure would cut defense spending by more than $6 billion compared to 2025 spending proposal, and it would take money from new key priorities while underfunding programs that are no longer funding it. Or excuse me, let me say that again. And it would take money from key new priorities while overfunding programs that no longer need it. So basically, if they do a continuing resolution for the defense, or for the Department of Defense, if they just do a continued resolution, that pretty much all they are doing is just copying the type of fundings that they had in 2024 and just putting it for the time frame in 2025 for whatever time that they agreed for the continued resolution. The problem is that it's not going to go to the new construction that they need, that they're going from new military housing. It's not going to go refurbish many different things that they need in the Department of Defense. So it can cause a lot more issues than it helps for the continued resolution. So Secretary Austin's really trying to get them to approve for the funding for the rest of the year, but I don't think he's going to be that successful with it.
So how likely, I was asking this question when we get into these budget government shutdowns, how likely do you feel that we are at the precipice of another shutdown? Oh yeah, and by the way, the last one was 35 days. And January 28, 2019, the CBO reported that estimated 35-day partial government shutdown cost the American economy at least $11 billion. $3 billion of that was permanent losses.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I have a feeling that we are going to head for a government shutdown. Speaker Johnson and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are not in any type of agreement of how they want the funding to pass. And they really need to be at the same table to talk about what will pass, because it needs to pass the House and it needs to pass the Senate. If the House really wants it in one side, it's not going to pass over in the Senate, because that is still a majority for the Democrats. So they really need to sit down and talk to each other. And that is not a very common trend for the current Republicans in control right now. They want to do their own thing and screw anybody else, that wants to try to get things passed. They say my way or the highway. And that's not really how you work with bipartisanship. Can't be that way when the other party owns the other house.
And the sad part about it is you don't care. It shows that you don't care about the people, the constituents, because they're the ones that are going to suffer. I mean, we're talking about, national parks shutting down, military people not getting paid, depending how long it goes. You have people that work for the TSA working for national security, homeland security, things like that. They're not getting paid. VA people aren't getting paid. I mean, so, and then people don't want to come into work when they're not getting paid. So, I mean, you're putting people, and then also, like we mentioned from the Congressional Budget Office report from 2019, it does have ripple effects and ends up costing you more money than to just go ahead and just approve a budget and then hash it out, later on when you're meeting to make the next budget, as opposed to waiting to the last minute to try and use a political gimmick to try and mess with the election potentially. And this might backfire on the Republicans if a government shutdown does occur. Many people are saying that it probably will hurt the Republicans more than anything else and won't help their cause at all.
No, and it's actually, there is also another trend that's been voiced through particularly the House, and that's separating the big catch-all budget bill into 12. Now, typically there are a series of budget bills, 4 to 5. It depends on the year. Sometimes they make up and they combine a few, or they separate a few, but there's about 4 or 5 different funding bills that do have to get processed. They're talking about separating it into 12, which is what they used to do a couple decades ago. And separating it into smaller bits can probably make things a lot easier for them to get things passed. And it will prevent people from just saying, nope, we're going to sit down here and filibuster until they add this specific thing to the bill. And hell with everything, how and when it doesn't get passed, because I'm just going to fight and sit here and make sure it doesn't, because I want my thing on the bill.
Wow. I wonder
Yeah.
how this now this I have a question I didn't research, but my question popped in my head now. How would a government shutdown affect the election? I mean, we're talking about we're like close a little bit less than 50 days away from it. But if it were to go that long, if they're so dug in and we did come to that point, first of all, I don't see any of that stuff ever getting passed. As far as the SAVE Act, I don't see the SAVE Act ever becoming a reality. It just doesn't make any sense. And
No.
it causes more problems and may be unconstitutional.
Yeah, and that one, I don't know if this current Supreme Court will actually say that it's unconstitutional the way that this court is. So it's very possible that one of the district courts may say that. So as it goes through the paces, we'll see. But the states run the elections, even the federal elections. So the funding's there for that. That should already be secured and that should already be done. So that part, I'm not really worried about how the government shutdown will affect the federal election, because the state and cities already have that worked out. So we should be good there on the regular processing for that.
So now, what else do you think is important for veterans to know now, and what should we be doing to try to make sure that on as far as the new legislation and things that could help veterans, what should we be focusing on right now?
Honestly, calling your senators and House representatives on telling them to pass a federal budget, especially for the VA disability shortfall. So many veterans depend on that VA disability to pay the bills, because they live paycheck to paycheck, disability check to disability check very often. And having that miss can cause a lot of issues. Thankfully, I'm good. But I know a lot of veterans will not be good if they don't get that check on October 1st. So it's definitely call your House representatives and senators and just tell them to pass the funding for that, because that's really important. I can imagine a lot of veterans getting really ticked off, if that actually fails and the government shutdown happens and then the federal election. That'll be quite interesting to see. It will be very terrible to watch, because I know a lot of people that would be affected, but it would be quite interesting to see how that would affect on everybody's emotions for the election.
A few weeks ago, or a few months ago, a few shows ago, you and I talked. And once again, I said, I still believe, and it looks like it's more and more likely this is going to occur, is that I didn't see Donald Trump getting reelected. And now I advocated for Joe Biden to step down. I did think he was, a little bit long in the tooth and was probably better off, letting someone else take the reins. And I also think it's a good idea that they did put Kamala Harris in. How much confidence do you have in Kamala Harris's policies when it comes to her views on creating more aid and help for veterans, and also veteran policies?
Well, see, I wasn't a fan of Kamala Harris when she ran for president. I wasn't a fan of hers, which is fine. No, I mean, there were plenty of people to select for 2020. There was a lot of options out there, but she wasn't my pick. But it was mostly because of the policies that she had. I did like her as a senator. I watched her in the Senate hearings, and she kicked butt, and it was great to watch. And she was really good at asking the right questions and making sure that certain things are asked and brought up. And so I really did like her in that aspect. But yes, her policies did change for this upcoming election. And it's probably because of her mentorship under President Joe Biden, because her views did become more center, because Joe Biden was more center, and a lot more bipartisanship was what she went after, as well as to making sure that the government can run, the country can continue to run. And also, I think she's also hearing a lot of people's issues, a lot of constituents, because the ability to find affordable childcare, the inflation, a lot of different things that are coming up that regular citizens are having issues with. She's actually hearing this happening. And so it would be really great for her to win. And I really do I do think she will win, but I feel like I need to knock on wood as I'm saying this, because I'm really superstitious when it comes to these things, which is crazy because I'm more of a stats person, stats data person. But
just from watching Trump's history, I just knew he was going to just blow himself up. I just knew he's his own worst enemy, and he doesn't realize that and won't admit that. And
yeah,
that's kind of the problem, I think, with Trump. So I mean, I knew at some point he was going to do something, say something, and even if it was Biden, I think Biden, he did have me worried, but I'm so thankful that he did decide to step back. I wasn't a big fan of Kamala Harris either when she ran for president, mainly because when she was the DA, she was put a provision in, or recommended a provision where they wanted to arrest parents for truancy. And I thought that was the silliest thing. And then she, like in a press conference, is a very well-known clip of where she's like trying to explain it, and she like giggles, and that kind of it gave her a pretty bad taste in my mouth and a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths when she did that. But I was impressed once again with how she's handled herself and her growth and development as a leader. And watching on that debate stage, I think she proved it.
Yeah. And I agree. And I'm really happy about her choice with Governor Tim Walz. I didn't know who he was when she picked, or when he was part of the list of the top 3. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure about that one. But when I did my research, I love that man. He's very great. He helps a ton of people out, and he's a veteran, and he understands what veterans go through. So I really do believe that was a great selection, and that's her great judgment.
Wow. Well, Stephanie, as always, it's great to have you on our show. You always do a great work as a correspondent, and keep us posted on what we need to know in the future.
Okay. Thank you so much.